I woke up not to the usual traffic noise or the farm geese calling, but to a sharp, repetitive honking that sounded like a goose trying to pilot a dump truck through a kazoo. I jumped out of bed and threw open the window. There it was, Karen's golf cart, headlights flashing like it was trying to star in a low-budget Fast and Furious spin-off, parked smack dab in the middle of my barn as if it belonged there. The engine was still coughing, her tiny HOA flag fluttered in the breeze, and worst of all, it had clearly spooked a raccoon so badly that it crashed through a window trying to flee. That was my first clue something was wrong. The second clue came when I stepped outside in my pajamas and found Karen standing right at my property line, arms crossed, wearing that smug grin like some cartoon villain who'd just flipped a switch to drop someone into a pit. She even had the nerve to shout, "You're welcome," for the improved aesthetic. As if that eyesore had ever looked better before her golf cart invaded it. Right then I knew two things: 1, she'd done this deliberately, and 2, she was about to regret it in a way involving feathers and nationwide internet humiliation. That barn wasn't just some old wooden shack like Karen seemed to think. It was my livelihood and my sanctuary. I'm a rural carpenter doing custom woodworking, furniture restoration, and on weekends, I tinker with vintage tools. I bought this place to escape home madness, yet somehow Karen had dragged it right back into my life like some cursed magnet for entitled chaos. The barn stored my tools, lumber, and half-finished client projects. I hadn't even gotten around to organizing the loft yet, and now it looked like a retirement home for rogue golf carts. Karen's cart hadn't just parked there, it had smashed into a rack of antique shutters I'd salvaged last month. One was broken clean in two. If Karen thought I'd just roll over, she clearly had no idea who she was messing with. Just days before, Karen had shown up uninvited while I was cleaning my yard, clipboard in hand, introducing herself as the whole landscape liaison. I told her as nicely as I could, weed whacker in hand, that I wasn't part of the HOA. My property line was literally a foot outside their reach. Her smile didn't even falter. She just said, "Not yet." Then she handed me a flyer about community visual cohesion, full of pictures of beige fences, beige driveways, and beige flower beds, because apparently, variety was a crime in whole land. I thought she was crazy. Now I knew she was just aggressive. The golf cart stunt was no accident. It was her opening move. I tried being civil. I walked over with my phone, snapped pictures of the cart inside my barn, and told Karen she had exactly 1 hour to move it before I called the sheriff. She just snorted like a cartoon pig and declared, "It's not trespassing if it's a shared structure." I blinked, trying to process the alternate reality she inhabited. She pointed to some ancient black and white property map held together by a glittery paperclip, claiming the barn once belonged to someone who paid HOA dues, so now it had historic community use and belonged to everyone. I could hardly believe it. There she was, hands on hips, rewriting property law with a bedazzled binder and pure delusion. By noon, the cart was still there. Worse, Karen emailed the HOA board accusing me of illegally detaining her vehicle and damaging its transmission due to the barn's neglectful climate. Not even kidding. I only found out because my neighbor Derek forwarded me the email chain titled "Lang Karen's Going Full Tilt." The HOA president, a guy named Roy who hadn't set foot on my property in over a year, suggested I attend the next compliance review panel to explain myself. I wasn't even a member. I didn't pay dues. I never attended meetings. But now, they wanted me to justify why a woman had parked her battery-powered clown car inside my workspace without permission. That's when absurdity turned to fury, and that fury inspired the most poetic, petty, poultry-themed revenge plan I'd ever dreamed up. But before we get to the feather, so let's back up. The barn had history. Built in 1926. It had survived 2 tornadoes and a lightning strike. It had character. I'd restored most of it myself. Every beam and brace held a story. So when Karen claimed it was just when she called the barn a communal landmark, I nearly choked on my coffee. She wasn't interested in history, she craved control. Karen was the kind of person who made PowerPoint presentations about garden gnomes and tried to standardize mailbox colors. If I let this slide, it wouldn't stop here. Today it was the golf cart, tomorrow, it would be her hosting a yoga retreat in my barn loft. I gave her one final warning, this time in writing. I drafted a formal notice, slipped it into a plastic sleeve, and zip-tied it to the steering wheel of her cart. It read, "Unauthorized vehicle parked on private property, must be removed by 6 p.m. or will be repurposed as agricultural infrastructure." Karen saw me attach it and laughed a head thrown back, arms waving like some villain in a soap opera. She called out, "Oh please, what are you going to do? Turn it into a chicken nest?" Well, I wasn't planning that at first. But the moment she said it, something clicked. That was exactly what I was going to do. If Karen wanted to treat my barn like her personal parking lot, I'd treat her cart like part of the barn, a very creative, very public, very clunky barn accessory. So I did what any reasonable guy with a sense of humor and a grudge would do. I spent the rest of the day sketching out plans, not for a lawsuit, not a complaint, for a chicken coop, and not just any coop. This was going to be the most over-the-top, Wi-Fi enabled, solar-heated, Instagram-ready chicken condo ever built inside a golf cart. I made a list of materials, called my cousin Rai, who owed me a favor after crashing his dirt bike into my shed last spring, and found a poultry auction happening in the next town over. The plan was set, the gears were turning. Karen had parked her future, and I was about to turn it into the joke of the year. That night, I stood in the barn doorway watching the sun sink behind the hills. The cart sat there like a smug little robot, completely unaware of its fate. My dog curled up at my feet, tail wagging like he sensed the coming chaos. I scratched behind his ears and said, "Ready for some chickens, boy, because this cart is about to get clucked." And just like that, revenge officially went free range. The next morning, I was at the poultry auction before dawn, nursing burnt gas station coffee and scanning pens like a man on a mission. The auctioneer, a wiry guy in overalls named Donna, didn't even bat an eye when I told him I wanted chickens that looked visually intimidating but were photogenic in direct sunlight. He handed me a card and said, "Aisle 3 has some high drama hens." That's where I met Beconza, a sassy Rhode Island red with one foot bandaged and a resting face that could curdle milk. She strutted like she owned the place and pecked at my shoelace like it personally offended her lineage. I liked her immediately. I walked away with 8 hens, one confused-looking rooster, and a big bag of starter feed. As I loaded the birds into the truck, I whispered the plan to Beacons. She blinked once and promptly pooped on the tailgate. I took that as a yes. By the time I got back to the barn, Karen's cart was still very pristine and untouched, like it was waiting to fulfill its destiny. I cleared the lower barn floor of tools and broken shutters and laid the groundwork. We rolled the golf cart into a corner, and with Ree's help, built a wooden ramp leading up to the front seat. I fashioned nesting boxes from old apple crates where the golf bags used to be. We stuffed the glove compartment with straw, and I removed the steering wheel entirely to give the chickens more space to roost. Ree laughed so hard when I installed the perch bar across the front seat, he nearly fell off the ladder. Karen showed up during the setup, sunglasses on, holding a tiny chihuahua that looked like it had survived 3 nervous breakdowns. She didn't come near the barn and just stood on the gravel path like a yoga pants-clad vulture and called out, "I see you're still holding my property hostage." I wiped my hands and replied, "No ma'am. Your property is being enhanced." She squinted at the golf cart turned half chicken condo, her lips tightening into a grim line. "You're going to regret this," she muttered. That was the last thing she said before storming off in a huff, her dog trailing behind like it wanted no part of the drama. I wired the barn with motion sensor cameras, some pointed right at the cart, others mounted high to catch wide shots of the whole interior. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. At this point, it was performance art. I even started live streaming I started streaming the chickens live under the title Karen's Cart Coop Cam, set to some chill acoustic music. Sure, it was ridiculous, but the stream blew up overnight. People tuned in to watch Beacons and her flock pecking corn off the dashboard or snoozing in the front seat. Within just 3 days, I'd gained 20,000 followers and donations started pouring in faster than I expected. With the extra funds, I bought more feed, upgraded the lighting, and installed a solar-powered fan system. Karen's golf cart had officially become the swankiest poultry penthouse in town. One of my viewers, an art teacher from Colorado, sent over custom name tags for the chickens. Alongside Beacons, we now had Benjamin Franklin, Cluck Norris, Agatha Christie, Yoko Ono, Amelia Earhart, and Princess Leia. The rooster, a loud but bewildered gentleman who crowed at exactly 2 a.m. every night, was dubbed Roostway. The name plaques were glued to the dashboard, and each bird got a personality spotlight on the live stream overlay. At this point, the Coop had sponsors, fan art, and even merchandise. The HOA board was utterly clueless about how to handle any of it. Karen, of course, was furious. She called the board demanding they take action, claiming my chickens were running an illegal business right from her property. She even called it vehicle-based foul laundering in her complaint, which, thanks to a sympathetic board member, got leaked and posted on Reddit. Within hours, it was trending. A meme popped up with her quote over a photo of a chicken wearing sunglasses behind the wheel of a golf cart. I printed it out and hung it on my barn door. Things escalated fast from there. Karen started patrolling the edge of my property like a hawk with serious boundary issues. She stood with binoculars snapping photos of everything. One evening, she even climbed onto a cooler across the street, yelling, "How do you sleep at night knowing you've corrupted barn space?" I just shrugged and said, "The hens sleep better than I do." Then I pointed to the Coop cam, where Amelia Earhart was snoring against the steering wheel. She screamed some nonsense I couldn't even make out and stomped off. That became her routine: show up, shout, storm off. Meanwhile, the chickens clucked and unbothered, pampered, and wildly popular. Then Karen tried to take things further. One night, she sneaked over to the barn, thinking no one would see her, and tried to get inside. But I'd installed a pressure sensor mat just inside the door as a joke. When she stepped on it, the barn lit up like a stage, and all 8 chickens woke up instantly, squawking like mad. Beacons flapped her wings dramatically and lunged straight at Karen's knees. Karen screamed, tripped over the ramp, and fell backward into a pile of mulch. All of it was caught in glorious night vision and uploaded before sunrise. The internet went wild. Someone added opera music to the footage. Another edited it into a slow-motion Matrix-style parody. Comments called Karen the chicken whisperer of chaos. By the end of the week, my barn had become a local spectacle. People drove by just to take pictures. A food truck even showed up on Saturday selling egg sandwiches with names like the Canadier and Bochin cheese. I didn't encourage it, but I didn't stop it either. The more noise there was, the more ridiculous Karen's claim to the cart became. She stopped calling it hers in public, instead saying she lent it to the community for artistic reinterpretation. That was her legal excuse, but no one bought it, especially after she tried sneaking in again, this time wearing a poncho and sunglasses, thinking she was undercover. Beacons recognized her immediately. I swear that hen has a personal vendetta. The icing on the cake came when a local morning news show wanted to do a feature on unexpected farm creativity. They interviewed me right in the barn, chickens perched behind me, with the cart decorated in streamers and motivational chicken quotes like "Don't let the hoe cage your dreams." Karen spent the entire shoot outside, waving frantically at the news van, trying to tell her side. The reporter politely declined to interview her, explaining on air that they don't usually feature background characters who storm off mid-interview. Karen's fury was now simmering like a volcano made of vinegar and glitter pens. She wasn't backing down. I could see it in the way she started emailing the county, filing code violations and claiming my barn didn't meet structural standards for poultry housing. But the cart? That was still hers, or at least, everyone knew it was. If she demanded I return it, she'd have to admit to the world it was her cart and now proudly serving as Beacon's egg-laying throne. Karen wasn't brave enough for that. Not yet. But she was close to snapping, and I had a feeling things were about to get even more interesting. I had a feeling Karen's next move would cross the line from annoying to downright illegal. What I didn't expect was just how far she'd go to reclaim a cart she never had the right to park there in the first place. Her move came like a punchline nobody asked for but everyone somehow saw coming. It was a Tuesday morning, around the time the chickens were usually enjoying their corn mash and I was reviewing client sketches in the barn, when a beat-up white van pulled into my driveway. It had magnetic decals on the doors that read Metro Animal Control Services, except the letters were peeling, and someone had obviously painted over part of Metro to cover what used to say Matt's Party Rentals. I stepped out, wiping my hands on the rag, just in time to see a lanky guy in his 20s hop out. He wore a polyester uniform and carried a butterfly net, a clipboard, and what looked like a Nerf tranquilizer gun. He looked lost, nervous, sweaty, and fake all at once. Before I could say anything, he squinted at me and said, "We're here to collect illegal poultry specimens on behalf of the local homeowners association." Behind him, the van's back doors swung open and out stepped Karen. She tried to hide behind a massive pair of sunglasses, clutching a rolled-up folder of what she clearly thought were legal documents. I blinked at the scene. The chickens clucked in perfect harmony from inside the barn, like they were mocking the whole absurd setup. I asked the guy, "You got ID?" He stammered something about being contracted through Suburban Animal Compliance Partners, then muttered he left his badge in his other van. I told him this wasn't a clown show and stepped forward to take a closer look at his paperwork. That's when he dropped the clipboard, bent over to pick it up and accidentally fired the dart gun into Karen's shin. She let out a scream that probably echoed 5 counties over. The dart bounced off harmlessly, but watching her limp in circles, yelling at the poor kid posing as animal control, was like a scene straight out of a sitcom filmed on a dare. I didn't even have to call the sheriff as the sheriff showed up on his own. Apparently, someone from the neighborhood had called in about suspicious white van activity and a possible hostage chicken situation. Sheriff Dalton was a tall, leathery man with a mustache that demanded attention. He'd known me for years and even bought a reclaimed oak bench from me last fall. When he saw Karen in the van, he didn't ask for any context. He just walked up, tilted his hat back, and said, "Karen, are you impersonating government services again?" Her reply was a breathless jumble about health codes, barn hazards, unpermitted poultry zones, and a rogue rooster. The sheriff just pointed at the van and asked the fake agent what his name was. The kid practically dissolved. He muttered something about being promised snacks, then sprinted back into the van and peeled out down the road, leaving a trail of feathers from a loose bag in the back. Karen tried to save face, insisting she was only conducting a citizen inspection and that the chickens were a grave biohazard threatening local property values. The sheriff looked at me and asked if I wanted to press charges. I said, "Not yet, I'm saving that card." Instead, I handed him the barn cam footage of the entire debacle, including the dart gun incident and Karen's wild accusations. He chuckled the whole time, especially at the part where Roost Wayne flapped out of the golf cart and scared the kid into dropping his fake credentials. The sheriff took down Karen's name again and issued a formal warning. Karen stormed off, humiliated but not defeated. She was spiraling, but she hadn't hit rock bottom yet. Later that evening, I reviewed the security footage for editing. I knew this latest fiasco was about to go viral. I clipped together the best moments, added some dramatic opera music, and uploaded it as Karen's Cluck, Animal Control Gone Wild. It hit 500,000 views overnight. People couldn't get enough of her dart mishap or the moment she screamed, "That rooster is threatening me." The fan base was thriving. Someone made a remix. Another person sent me a mini plush version of Beacons. My barn had officially become the internet's favorite chicken sitcom. But while the world was laughing, Karen was plotting. New signs appeared along the edge of her yard reading "Biohazard, do not approach." She even started spraying vinegar toward my property line, claiming she was sanitizing the air. I ignored Ita until she filed another HOA complaint, this time accusing me of running a commercial. Karen accused me of running an unlicensed poultry operation. She attached screenshots from the live stream and claimed I was financially exploiting livestock on stolen property. That was the first time she formally mentioned the golf cart again, finally gearing up to try reclaiming it through legal pressure. Her complaint triggered another home meeting, which I attended purely out of spite. The meeting was held in a cramped community center that looked like a low-budget dentist's office. Karen stood in front of a makeshift slideshow titled "Poultry-Related Property Damage" and pointed at a blurry photo of Beacons staring straight at the camera. "This chicken," she declared, "has repeatedly threatened me through nonverbal intimidation." The room fell silent until someone in the back snorted. Then another chuckled. The HOA president, Roy, cleared his throat and asked if she had any actual proof of property damage. Karen wildly flailed her arms, knocking over her poster board, and shouted, It's not about damage, it's about moral decay. That's when I stood up and asked if they wanted to see the cam footage from the dart gun incident and the fake citizen inspection. The board voted 4-1 in my favor, dropping Karen's complaint. Her face looked like she'd just eaten a lemon and sunglasses and all, but I knew she wasn't done. She was too entitled to that cart. So, I added a new feature to the barn cam stream as something for the drama. I introduced Chicken Court at Thursdays, where I played judge and jury in mock trials featuring the hens, complete with voiceovers and overlays. The audience voted weekly on whether Karen was guilty of crimes like vehicular squatting, poultry harassment, and false biohazard claims. I even edited in clips from real home meetings spliced with chicken reactions. One stream topped 1 million viewers. My ad revenue soared. Karen's fury rose right alongside it. Then came the night she really tried to reclaim the cart. Just after midnight, the camera caught motion at the barn's side door. Karen slipped in, dressed in black sweats, carrying what looked like a tool belt and a tarp. Her plan was clear: cover the cart, tow it away, and vanish before morning. But she hadn't counted on the tripwire camera I'd set up earlier that week. The moment she stepped forward and touched the cart, two things triggered at once. The LED floodlights blazed on, and a loudspeaker connected to my laptop blasted a rooster crowing on repeat at full volume. Roost Wayne joined in live, echoing the effect. The hens went wild. Karen screamed, tripped on the perch ramp, and slid across the floor into a pile of feed bags. My phone started pinging like crazy, and the cameras caught everything and automatically uploaded the footage to my private channel. I watched from my porch as she scrambled out of the barn, her clothes covered in straw and what I can only assume was chicken poop. She limped back to her property like a cartoon villain who'd gotten too close to the dynamite. I didn't stop here and didn't have to. The internet would handle the rest. I edited the footage, added dramatic music, and scheduled the video premiere under the title Operation Foul Play, Karen's Midnight Extraction Mission. It was set to go live at noon the next day. I had no doubt it would break every record. What Karen didn't realize was that every move she made only made the story better, funnier, and more humiliating for her. She'd turned a golf cart dispute into a full-blown saga. With every attempt to reclaim her property, she only buried herself deeper. The chickens weren't just poultry anymore, they were icons. The cart wasn't just a vehicle, it was the centerpiece of a national joke. And Karen? She wasn't just the nuisance, she was the villain in her own never-ending sitcom. The best part? The next episode was already writing itself. Karen disappeared for a full 48 hours after her failed midnight raid. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd learned her lesson, but then, a massive delivery truck pulled up outside her house and unloaded 6 industrial-strength floodlights. That same afternoon, she installed them in her backyard, all pointed directly at my barn. By sundown, it looked like the surface of the sun had landed in rural suburbia. My barn, once a cozy, softly lit coop with quiet fans and nesting hens, was now lit up like a Hollywood set. Beacon stood in the window like a war general, surveying the enemy's every move. The rooster hadn't stopped crowing since the first spotlight flicked on. I tried to keep it civil. I knocked on Karen's door. No answer. I emailed the HOA board. They sent back a generic response about neighborly discretion and everyone's right to install security lighting. But this wasn't security, it was warfare. I couldn't even walk into the barn without squinting, feeling like I was in an interrogation room. So, I fought back the only way I know, by turning the whole mess into content. I installed large mirror panels along the side of the barn, cheap ones I grabbed from a salvage yard. They didn't need to look perfect, they just had to reflect those blinding spotlights right back at her second-story windows. The very first night it went live, Karen's bedroom lit up like a UFO had landed on her roof. She screamed out her window, "I'll sue you for retinal damage." I called back, "Only if you can spell it." But the escalation didn't stop there. In fact, the mirrored revenge kicked off a whole new phase of chicken-themed defiance. I added a sunblock mode feature to the live stream, complete with dramatic music every time the mirrors rotated. Viewers loved it. Donations doubled. One guy from Michigan even sent a solar-powered disco ball to install inside the barn. Another viewer from Oregon mailed me chicken sunglasses. I didn't even know those existed, but Beacons wore hers like royalty. Meanwhile, Karen filed yet another HOA complaint, this time about weaponized light reflections. Roy from the board called me to give a heads up, and I could hear the barely concealed laughter in his voice. He admitted that while they technically couldn't stop either of us, the whole board was watching the stream and had unofficially voted Beacons as the HOA president. That gave me an idea. If Karen wanted to keep this war going, I'd make sure the whole world saw it. I built a small drive-through window on the side of the barn, and not fancy, just a little shelf with a slot and a sign that read, "Eggs now available, courtesy of Karen's cart." I wasn't selling anything that would have crossed zoning laws, but I accepted donations and gave away eggs, each with a printed flyer featuring Karen's face next to a cartoon chicken under the caption extremely entitled. The local sheriff stopped by, grabbed a carton, and laughed for 10 straight minutes before driving off. On Saturdays, the line for eggs wrapped around the block. Someone brought a sign that said, "We stand Benjamin Franklin." Another held up a painting of Karen as a cartoon villain, riding a golf cart off a cliff. Then the news got wind of it. A local station crew asked to film a segment. I agreed on one condition: they had to blur the chickens' faces. They thought I was joking. I wasn't. My girls were celebrities now and deserved their privacy. Karen saw the news van arrive and immediately lost it. She ran out into the street in a bathrobe and a head wrap like she'd just escaped from a telenovela. She shouted about legal rights, slander, and unauthorized commercial activity. The reporter calmly replied they were on public property and that the story was human interest and not a criminal investigation. Karen shrieked back, "Chickens aren't human. This is illegal journalism." I don't even know what that means, and neither did the reporter. Still, the footage ran on the evening news, complete with a dramatic shot of Rooster Wayne crowing while Karen flailed in the background. That night, Karen finally hit her breaking point. I was locking up the barn when I heard something sloshing. I peeked through the slats and saw Karen holding a giant bucket of pink paint. Before I could react, she hurled it across the front of the barn, coating my freshly sanded wood and dripping neon sludge. She screamed something about vandalism not being vandalism if you're reclaiming property. The irony hit harder than the paint. I ran out, phone already recording, and caught her red hand literally. She slipped on a patch of straw, fell backward, and landed squarely on a bag of feed. One of the chickens, spooked by the chaos, flew straight onto her stomach and perched there like a triumphant goblin. I didn't intervene. I let the camera roll. She flailed and screeched as the pink paint soaked through her sweatpants. When she finally struggled to her feet, she saw me standing there. Karen hissed, "I'm calling my lawyer." I calmly replied, "Great, I'll send the video to yours, too." Soaked in defeat and humiliation, she stomped off. I uploaded the footage titled "Karen Goes Full Picasso, Ruins Her Own Property." It hit 2.3 million views within 24 hours. The next home meeting was packed, a standing room only. People showed up wearing chicken hats. Someone handed out Team Beacon stickers. Roy took the podium and opened with, "Before we begin, yes, we've all seen the video. Yes, it was hilarious. Now, can we please get back to actual neighborhood issues?" Karen demanded a vote to condemn my barn as a public nuisance. Roy called for a vote. It failed 9-1. Karen being the sole dissenting vote, she started shouting about injustice, favoritism, corruption, and poultry dictatorship. That phrase alone sent half the room into laughter. When I got home that night, I found something incredible waiting in the barn. One of the chickens, a Benjamin Franklin, had laid a perfect double-yolked egg right in the golf cart's cup holder. It felt symbolic, like even the chickens were in on the joke. I snapped a picture, added a golden glow filter, and posted it with the caption, "Proof that entitlement lays golden eggs." It was shared by half a dozen influencers and even made a segment on late-night TV. Karen had thrown everything she could at me: fake animal control, floodlights, late-night theft, buckets of paint, and still ended up the laughingstock. Her original scene parking that stupid golf cart in my barn had blossomed into the most beloved chicken-themed internet sensation of the year. And the best part? She couldn't even admit it was hers anymore. If she did, she'd be claiming ownership of the viral chaos of the egg giveaways and the rooster who now crowed every morning at 5 a.m., just loud enough for her bedroom window. Still, I knew she had one more move left. She wasn't the type to quit, and I wasn't the type to forget. So I started preparing a reinforcing the barn lock, updating motion sensors, buying an extra camera, because whatever she had planned next was going to be desperate, and the last thing I wanted was to be caught unprepared when desperation finally collided with karma. All I had to do was sit back, sip my coffee, and let the chickens keep clucking. They were doing most of the work now anyway. Karen's final act came wrapped in chaos and desperation, just as I expected. By now, the entire neighborhood, the HOA board, and most of the internet knew her golf cart was the punchline of a chicken-themed saga that refused to die. She'd become a living mummy, the kind you never recover from, the kind that shows up in gifts for years. Yet somehow, instead of fading into the background with a shred of dignity, she went all in on one last swing at rewriting reality. It started with a thick envelope wedged in my mailbox, marked in bold letters, "Legal Notice of Property Reclamation." Inside was a letter signed by someone claiming to be Karen's property attorney, full of dramatic language accusing me of grand theft, illegal use of a personal vehicle, and unauthorized modification of a motorized personal mobility unit. The whole document read like it was drafted by a soap opera villain trying to pass the bar exam. I laughed so hard I almost dropped it into the chicken feed. I didn't bother responding, I just forwarded it to my real attorney, who replied within minutes that it wasn't worth the postage it was printed on. But I knew it was a signal. Karen was about to escalate beyond HOA complaints, livestream sabotage, and late-night paint raids. This time, she wasn't just coming for the cart, she was coming for the spotlight, and didn't care if she burned herself in the process. The following weekend, I hosted what I called the Card Coop Community Celebration, a local thank you event for neighbors who'd supported me through months of absurdity. We set up folding tables outside the barn, offered free cartons of eggs and lemonade, and had a tiny merch table where folks could grab Team Beacon stickers, pins, and even little plush chickens wearing sunglasses. The vibe was light, ridiculous, and overwhelmingly positive. Kids posed with the real chickens. Teens live tweeted the event. Even Roy from the HOA showed up wearing a chicken hat, admitting he was off duty for the day. Everything was smooth until the news crew arrived. Apparently, some guest woe had tipped off the local news again. Only this time, it wasn't a casual interest piece. They showed up mid-afternoon with a full camera rig and a reporter planning a feature on the bizarre but brilliant viral phenomenon. I welcomed them, showed off the golf cart coupe, introduced them to beacons, and even let the reporter hold one of the fluffier hens, a Yoko Ono. We were mid-interview when we all heard a shrill voice in the distance. Karen, marching down the sidewalk like she owned the entire county, waving her fake legal papers, screaming about theft, fraud, and animal abuse. The camera crew's eyes lit up. Chaos had arrived. Karen stormed into the shot, yelling that everything I built was based on a stolen vehicle. She pointed at the golf cart, saying, "That belongs to me, and you've turned it into a chicken-fested nightmare." The reporter calmly asked for her name and if she had a moment to explain her side. That was the worst possible question. She lit up like a firework, launching into a monologue about HOA tyranny, neighborhood neglect, and how she was the victim of internet bullying. As she ranted, one of the chickens hopped onto the cart's roof and a beacon's laid an egg right into a flower pot Karen had planted last month by the barn. A symbolic, poetic, and perfectly timed. Then came the twist. Just as Karen was demanding the cart be returned immediately, a loud, distressed clucking erupted from inside. Everyone turned as beacons burst out of the front seat, full-on mama hen mode. She'd been laying eggs in the cup holder all week and now she'd apparently decided to brood. With a fierce flap and shriek, she charged straight at Karen like a feathery war goddess. Karen tried to dodge, but slipped on a patch of hay and crashed to the ground in front of a news crew all covered in feathers and clutching a broken high heel. The camera captured every glorious HD moment. The instant Karen realized the camera was rolling on her downfall, her face twisted between horror and theatrical denial. She lunged to cover the lens with her hand. The reporter calmly said, "Ma'am, please don't touch the equipment." Within 10 minutes, a sheriff's deputy arrived, called in by a neighbor who'd seen Karen approaching with a large bag and feared more vandalism. It was the same deputy who'd warned her before. He looked at the scene and muttered, "Seriously?" Karen tried arguing she was reclaiming her cart. The deputy asked for proof of ownership, She pulled out a wrinkled document, basically a receipt from a golf outlet store. No serial number, no ID, just faded ink that read Golf Cart Model A. The deputy turned to me. I calmly handed over every sheriff's report, all the video footage, and documentation of every time she trespassed, vandalized, or been warned. The deputy told her she was violating multiple property codes and detained her on the spot. As she was being walked back to the cruiser, she screamed one last time, "This isn't over, it's just the beginning." That line made it into the news report, edited with slow-motion footage of beacons flapping her wings. The segment aired the next night under the headline, "Local Man Turns Golf Cart into Viral Chicken Coop Home Mayhem Ensues, Karen's Fall Complete." The footage went viral again. This time national outlets picked it up. Talk shows debated it. A popular YouTube channel even did a reaction video. One of the chickens, Clark Narration, now had his own meme line. The next week, I received a certified letter from the county. Due to prolonged abandonment and repeated legal filings, the golf cart was officially declared abandoned personal property and was now legally mine. I framed the letter and hung it next to a photo of Beacon sitting proudly in the driver's seat, wearing her chicken sunglasses. Karen eventually stopped showing up. Whether it was shame, legal restrictions, or sheer exhaustion, no one knew. Her house went up for sale a month later, listed as a quiet home in a quirky community. No mention of the chicken incident, but everyone knew. I kept the barn open once a month for visitors, letting the community drop by to meet the hens, take photos, and grab eggs. The live stream stayed strong, sponsors increased, and merchandise expanded. Someone even sent a tiny chicken throne for beacons, which I mounted proudly on top of the cart's dashboard. In the end, Karen's entitled rage became a full-blown local legend. Her cart, transformed by petty revenge and poultry persistency, stood as a monument to what happens when arrogance meets a creative neighbor with a barn and a live stream setup. All she had to do was park somewhere else. Instead, she handed me the greatest story of my life. And for that, I'll always be grateful. So will the chickens, especially Beacons. She never missed a single morning, perched triumphantly atop the cart, clucking like she owned the whole world. Because after everything, in a way, she kind of did.